2, 1. Boom. We're live. So welcome back, everybody. This is the first time I've done this live interview for a few weeks now. We've done quite a lot. I think we're approaching our 60th episode, and it's a lot of fun to do these. That's, I think, the 60th episode in 2022. So a lot of fun to do these, and this time we're joined by Rachel from O'Reilly Research. Rachel, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're a little bit later than expected because my computer had a glitch, but I'm very glad today because the topic of conversation when I was speaking to your team and getting this set up, it's very important to me. And there's a lot I want to learn from what you and the team at O'Reilly are doing from a research angle. I mean, we're going to be looking at how the industry is changing with AI and what the role of AI will be with metaverse. We had a massive in-depth conversation, just returned from AI Summit, in London, which is an awesome conference. Really recommend it to anyone that's planning on going for next year. And yeah, this really stuck out. So I kind of want to just get a bit of a background on you first, Rachel. Just how did you get started in this area of work? Was it by chance, which it was for me, or have you always had a passion for things that are tech orientated? And what led you to your role as VP for data and AI with O'Reilly Research today, please, Rachel?
Yeah, it really started with I kind of fell into technical publishing to begin with. And
Nice.
so went through a bunch of different topics. Like I started with optical engineering, actually, right?
Nice.
Sort of these topics where we would put out content, and then I would actually see it in my sort of consumer technology things like 10 years later. And I'd be like, oh my God, it made it. Over the years, in the more computer fields, I've, looked at programming languages and UX and AI, of course. And so more recently, we've really dug into data first, which is obviously sort of the food of AI, and then AI itself. And it's been a fun time to be in that area, I think, prompted by really the open sourcing of TensorFlow to see what people are doing with it, like given a little bit of a leg up, what can we do? And there's been so many AI winters that I'm hoping we're not going into another one. I don't think so, but so just so many interesting things, and actually seeing them, seeing things in production it's a fun time to be in the area.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that last point. It's a lot of fun, Rachel, like seeing what companies are doing, seeing the kind of innovations, and seeing also from the other side as well. I was speaking with the UK Ministry of Defence and several other people from the civil service, and I think from Omdia, and looking at from what regulations going to be doing and what policies are going to be doing. There's a lot over in the UK about the new government regulation and program, and I forgot the name off the top of my head, but they're launching a very big document to say what they're going to be doing around it. And I always think it's interesting to see this innovation. I've got to ask, have you got like a favorite tool? You mentioned the open sourceness of TensorFlow. Is there one that you initially prefer, or one that's close to your heart? Because I guess that's a pretty open-ended question. Actually.
No, that's a good question. I do like TensorFlow. It's sort of like the gateway to being able to do everything else. Like I said, that to me, it's more about like the open sourcing of the tooling, right?
Yeah.
And this idea that not everybody, like, TensorFlow is from Google. Not every company has the power and the research and the resources that Google has, right? So if you help a whole industry, right, you're basically created an industry. And now that that's happening, then you can tweak it from there. So I think that is a cornerstone. I'm trying to think of other things that have been interesting. SageMaker's been interesting because I honestly didn't think that was going to make it. And it's definitely gaining ground now. So I'm kind of like, that's interesting, and that's probably because it's connected to AWS. But yeah, those are kind of the tools. We watch all the tools. Like one of the up and coming tools we're watching is Ray. But
nice. Come across that.
Yeah, it's a new one. It's really, in its infancy, but I think that's something we're going to see more of. It's going to eat into Spark a little bit, I think. It's one of those things too, where like these tools come on the scene and it's sort of like really slow and then it's fast. So I think so it's in its really slow phase, and then I think we'll see it catch on, but time will tell.
That's cool. And I like how you got the open mindedness to it about seeing what tools, like that one I'd never heard of. So it's very cool to see, like, keep an eye on it and see how we can use it and see how we can leverage it to help and all those kind of angles. And it reminds me, it was yesterday. I think it was from the economist Paul Krugman. Is that correct? I think that's the guy. And he was saying that the internet, and this was in 2005, I think, would be no bigger than the fax machine. And I just think, like, you never know, like you were saying, like, you never know where that leap can come or that innovation spike can come.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing about AI, actually. I was thinking when I was sort of prepping for this.
Yeah.
I'm of the mind that we don't, especially sort of like the general public that's even tech savvy. It's not like you're like, I'm going to go get my AI thing or, put AI into production or, you know what I mean? It's like AI is infused in so many of the services and products that we use that that's why I don't think we'll have an AI winter. I think we're getting used to having these. And if we have, basically, if you have a lot of data, you get to a point where you need to use AI. And I think it's here for the long run. It's basically just sort of what incremental things are we going to see and how are we going to implement it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make because I see it, Rachel, and I see people, like someone was saying to me, and I don't know if it was on a podcast or a conversation I can't remember, but I remember the line, and it was basically saying AI is useless unless you have data, right? Because if you don't, it's like, it's the first stepping stone. It's not, don't go out to a vendor or don't go start creating a team to build some algorithm if you got no data, which certain people don't know. So it's always important to have that lesson. And I'd love to know what you think, Rachel. You were touching on it there. What are some of the developments happening in the AI industry that you're currently most excited about, and why, or what is it you're seeing that you think, wow, that's awesome and that's a real cool development?
So there's two general areas that I'm seeing come to actual use. That's what's exciting to me, like actually changing what we see. So one of them is sort of like AI enabled automation, right? So we're seeing that sort of in the tech space in a couple of different places, right? So for instance, when you look at your infrastructure, which is most likely in the cloud, or at least part of it is in the cloud, being able to watch over that in terms of security, in terms of, is it optimized? Is it working? I always think of Netflix, as users now, technically savvy users, if that goes down for 1 second, we're like, what? Like, you know what I mean?
The whole world falls apart.
Yeah. So, but you can't, like, as a human being or a team of human beings, you honestly can't keep an eye on all of that. So this idea of observability has come into our world. The idea that it's this proactive watching sort of this, giant world of infrastructure and the data that it produces, right? So I think that's really important in terms of being able to make, I don't even want to say the best use of sort of like cloud infrastructure, but if you're going to use it in any way, in a safe way, you need to have this observability. And I think, like I said, the data that comes out of that is gigantic. And to be able to make any use of that at all, it needs to have AI in there to churn out the analysis, right? So that's one piece that's really sort of technical. And I can see how that automation would then find its way to other things like recommendation engines, right? Which have been around for a long time. The same sort of concept, like, hey, I see you're searching for all these things. Maybe you'd like this.
Yeah.
Right. Sort of alongside that, I think the other cool thing that we've seen is something called Copilot. Have you heard of that with GitHub?
No, I haven't.
So Copilot was something that was being talked about, and everyone was like, cool. But I think it came out like sort of like and slapped everybody in the face. Basically, it is a program that helps programmers write code. It finishes off lines of code. It can do like the basic stuff. So we're actually finding, and I'd have to look into this a little bit more, but that people are using it and it's actually helping with up to 30% of the code in a program. So I think stuff like Copilot and this sort of this low code, no code world. Again, it's sort of these lower, like programs start out the same, right? Like, why do you have to like redo them all the time? Right. So, so if you can have, Copilot and they're helping you, that's not only going to like speed innovation and time to production, it's also going to allow people, honestly, the space and the time to think about how can we improve that? What are the different things that we can add on to?
Yeah.
So those are kind of like, I guess I think about them in sort of the tech and programming space. And so not in the consumer space, but you'll see the outcomes that are possible in the consumer space because of the work that can be done in that technical space. On the other hand, I think NLP is in a really interesting it's natural language processing, right? Transformers just came in as sort of a big way to sort of speed that up. Large language models like GPT-3 are super amazing. And so my example of this, right? So, and that's just being able to process all of that, like text and spoken data that's unstructured, which is like the majority of data that's out there, frankly, right? And so the more powerful, these language models are, the more that we can do with them. And sort of one example of this is taking NLP, pairing it with knowledge graphs, which is another piece that I think is coming into sort of vogue, I guess you would say, and doing something like a medical knowledge line or something, right? So you call up and you're like, I've got this, these symptoms, and then the voice on the other end of being able to say, you probably have this, you should call your doctor, or I'm sending you on to your doctor, or you're fine, like that's allergies. So I can see again, sort of it's this first line of being able to get questions answered, and again freeing up the people that would be doing this answering to more complex issues. So that's just a few of the things that I think are cool right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's cool. And I like how you've highlighted NLPs, because I was just looking at the Copilot program, and it's like trained on billions of lines of code, and turning natural language into prompts, which I think is going to be, I mean, what is it, like search at the moment? Like, I think we're already past it. I think they said by 2020, 50% of searches are going to be voice. I think it was 2020. I could be wrong, but I'm sure.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that, but that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, so I always think of myself like as sort of like Jane Doe or whatever. I have actually started even using my little like Siri on my phone to be like, hey, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It's huge, isn't it? Like you change
it.
Yeah.
So that's been really interesting. And NLP is really expensive and huge. So you're seeing people use sort of specialized versions of that, like fine tuning it and stuff. And that's a way to help, get out of having to use like these really big models. And it makes it faster too. So if you train it on a specialized system, to focus on, like we've said, like Python program, like Copilot would be like, say there's a Python programming subsection. So
very cool. And that makes a good segue to the next point that I want to ask, the next question I want to ask Rachel. So with all of this happening, with all this data being collected and all these ideas and AI churning out all these results or outcomes or predictions or whatever it's doing, where do you stand on the question of creativity and ownership? Do you think AI should own things? Is it their idea, or is it the engineers that came up with it? What do you think? Where's your stand?
Great question. So I'm still in the camp that it is not, the AI is not creating anything. They're following the rules and the algorithms that were set by the engineer, and then, like you said, being trained on the data. So I know there's like stuff where it's like AI wrote, a book or like wrote this music. I don't, because the rules and the algorithms were set by someone else. So to me, they're just following that. I know we're sort of, and in a lot of cases with AI, there's like a human in the loop, right?
Yeah, still huge.
Yeah, I think there's a point where we're going to get to, like, the idea is that it can continue to teach itself, right? Unsupervised learning and stuff like that. I think we're well away from that still. I could see if it starts to change the fundamental way it's been taught to think, augments that's when sort of that idea of, did the AI create it? But then it comes to like, okay, so maybe the AI did create it. What's the AI?
Yeah. I can't, how would you pay royalties to a piece of AI?
Like, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know. It's fascinating. I mean, I would love that to happen so that we can it.
Yeah.
But like I come from like a time when like Terminator 2 was like popular. And so I'm a little bit scared as well, like Skynet or whatever.
Yeah.
But but so yeah, I mean, interesting time. I think we're far away from that though. Sad. Well, I say sadly. I don't know. Maybe I'm wishing for something that we shouldn't be wishing for.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we talk about just going along with that. We talk so much about bias, right?
Yeah.
That
I think.
bias is taught to it. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So that's an example of how that's not coming out of the AI itself, right? So
Yeah.
that goes along to me with like it's not creating things.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, if it has a bias, how can it? I always think at the moment, anytime I see AI, I always say people to remember, or at least I think this is correct, or in my view, is it's always derivative. So it's nothing that is going to be creating itself, and it's always going to come back to a human eventually, whether it's doing something bad or whether the bias is wrong or whatever it might be. And I just think I can't put any creativity behind it because the creativity is all behind the human loop and or the human idea. That algorithm wouldn't be in place, or that piece of data wouldn't be there if it wasn't. Get rid of humans off the planet, you'll have very quickly.
Yeah, right. And then I guess there's also the thought that like what happens when something unexpected happens?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Is that I don't think that's creativity. I think that's just, again, it starts with that human. And it starts with those rules put in place. It's very interesting. I mean, I really like sci-fi too, so it's interesting to me to think like there's something out there. I mean, wasn't there also that guy that said he thought it was like AI was sentient, which I don't think that is true.
Yeah, he got let go, didn't he, from Google?
I believe so.
On leave, and I don't know what happened with it, and I can kind of understand it. I didn't read enough into it to give my version of it, but it's pretty wild to see that stuff being created. And like there was a situation with Facebook where the chatbot started speaking back to itself and it started having its own conversation, which kind of is unsupervised learning in my opinion. So I think like the tilt is there potentially, but even then it's feeding off data that wasn't originally created for them. So I always think, well, like maybe it is, but it's just quicker response. It's like playing ping pong against itself or something, like, but someone has to get that ball started. Like a human has to throw the ball first, if that's a good analogy, and then it can play off that. So I still think it's
there's also a thing, oh man, what is it called? I forget what it's called, but like in like learning theory, just for humans, right? There's you have to sort of like memorize, and then you start to use it, and then you start to recognize it, and at the very end is sort of creating your own thing, right? And so again, I think we're like early in the sort of steps of that pyramid. So
serious game. Have you got a favorite sci-fi film, Rachel?
Oh God, there's so many.
Top 3.
I'm trying to think. I mean, what have we been watching lately? God, I mean, I'm watching Stranger Things lately. That doesn't have to do with AI. I'm trying to think of science one. What was the one? I loved the one, and I can't remember the name of it, of course. That was where there were the aliens, and it was about time, and it was where the time was circular and not linear, with Amy Adams and Hawkeye. You know what's one? The Arrival. Right?
I was going to say it's Arrival, right? Yeah.
That was
when they go and talk to it, and it's got the guy from it's got Hawkeye. I forgot his name, Jeremy Renner.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the more of the hard sci-fi. Like I love that stuff where you're like, what?
Yeah, I like that one. What is it? The film. Okay, massive topic here, but I love asking people what their favorite is. And there was one with Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think it had
Source Code or something.
Source Code is cool, but there's another one. It's quite a Life. So anyone watching, go check out Life, because that's got Jake Gyllenhaal. Who else is in it? It's got Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Reynolds, Rebecca Ferguson.
I've not seen that.
It's really cool. It's a bit thrillery, and like it starts very lighthearted, and then it all goes down in a spiral, and it's about basically finding like an alien life form. But you should check that out, and that's kind of sci-fi for me, and Inception and stuff like that, and Interstellar.
And I also love that old one, AI by Steven Spielberg. That was fascinating. Talk about feelings and AI and all that stuff. So
yeah, and it's funny as well. I watched this thing. What's his name? The astronaut. I think his name's Chris, and he's written a great book, walking on as an astronaut, whatever it's called. And he reviewed all these sci-fi films, and the space film that got most accurate to the real deal I think he said, was 2001 Space Odyssey. He said all the other ones more recently, they always get things wrong. Like even that one with Brad Pitt where he's on the moon and Inception, Interstellar, sorry. And he said, surprisingly, that's like one of the earlier space films, and the one Tom Hanks was in, Apollo 13, I think. He said those two were the ones that were most accurate what it's like in space. That's wild. But some good film recommendations for anyone watching.
Yeah, I know, right?
So yeah, that leads me to the next point. You mentioned earlier about how new ideas coming through, Rachel. So what do you think a new idea and a new world that we're quickly being delved into is the metaverse? What do you think AI will play in that? Are you excited about metaverse? Is it something that's scared or excites you? You got opportunities for it? What do you think?
I think a lot of things right now. Like, I guess I haven't come to a conclusion. I mean, the things I think of when I think of the metaverse initially are like WALL-E, with us all sitting around doing nothing. And things coming to us. I also think how my nieces are like, that's how they spend half their time. They're 8 and 12, and they're in Fortnite, and they're in Roblox and all of that stuff. And I know that's not too complex, but I mean, they're always wanting different outfits and different things. And so, and that's a real sea change. I know that's video games, right? But like video games used to be, you'd play different video games. They gave you the stories. And now it seems like people will pick one world to sort of live in, and then it's a world that you either build or you keep going back to. I think there's a lot of possibilities, certainly in learning. Like that's something we're looking at O'Reilly is, how does the metaverse aid in learning? But I think right now it's much more a tool of sort of large enterprise, I guess is what I would say. And it's sort of a money grab. Unfortunately, I mean, and we've seen this before, like, right? Like what it was like Second Life. So there's always been this stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, I think, in the real world, like here we are talking, face to face, right? On video, we could easily be doing this like in 2 chairs in the metaverse, right? And I think I'd like to see what that feels like. I guess that's the thing. Like so many of us haven't really seen what that's like.
Yeah. Just quickly, there's a guy I'd love to introduce you to, Richard Fletcher. He's an awesome guy from MKI, and he hosts. I don't know how regular they are. I need to check, but I went to one of them, and he puts everyone in the metaverse, and you get to communicate. And if you've got like an Oculus or you've got a headset, you can join through that, and they do like proper talks and like chatting and like having coffee, and obviously you're sat there. And I was kind of just like, wow, this is cool because it gives you the idea of what the future is, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like AR and VR. I think so. There's like the metaverse, like flat on your screen, right? And then there's a metaverse like where you're like sort of submerged in it. And I think always the technology hasn't quite gotten there. But like again, I've played VR on like the PS5, and it was cool, but it's not quite good enough that and then you see, speaking of films like Ready Player One, that's super cool. So I think, again, it's one of those like slow and then fast. Like, I think we're not quite there with the technology.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, like given like the pandemic and everything else, like, people want a way to gather at the very least, right? Without being in danger. I mean, hopefully the pandemic is like a one and done for at least 100 years. But I think that want of sort of community will drive it. Like it's like it's like the internet. Like the internet, for better or worse, has brought communities together, right? And people thrive on that. This is sort of that, like on steroids.
Yeah, that's exactly what someone else said, Rachel. They say, and someone told me, so I'm a big fan of Brian Cox, and I always publicly display it, and I'm actually going to see Brian Cox in August, which I'm very excited about. But it's on his roadshow. But he said, like, and I think it's on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he says, like, try and picture one galaxy or one planet, sorry, and then try and picture 10 planets, and try and picture 100 planets, and try and picture 1,000 planets, and then try and picture, and then he steps it up to like 1,000 universes. And he gets all the way up to like 2 billion. And he's like, that's how much we currently know is out there at the moment. I think it's 2 billion planets. And he says, and then someone else I was speaking to was like, that's pretty much the same thing as the metaverse. Like you can't comprehend how far it can go because it's unlimited. It's like an empty.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, And then that goes back to like the Matrix and like, are we already in the metaverse? But
Yeah.
it's fascinating. But I think it goes back to what problem does it solve and or need does it fill?
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I guess what I'm saying right now is I think that people are intrigued by it. And I think right now, though, it's driven by revenue.
Yeah. I think that's a good way. Well, yeah. Most things are driven. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'd like to know then. So, looking at what we've just talked about, about AI development, and you made a great point earlier on, Rachel. Looking at it from a O'Reilly perspective, if you want, or maybe from a personal perspective, and obviously top level view. I'd never ask anyone to say anything around customers or what they look at, but from a top level view, unless they want to, but looking at it from how far do you think are companies away from terms of AI adoption, or how far along are they in AI adoption? Either how far away or how far along, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing has been a little bit static, again, maybe because of the pandemic and everything. So the last few years, there's somewhere between like 25 and 30% of at least the people that we survey have something in production, right? Like out in the world working. Then there's a large portion, let's say, I don't know the exact number, say 50% that are sort of like, AI is cool, we should use that. And then there's another 25% that's like, I don't see why we need that. And that stayed somewhat static. It's most popular where we're seeing things in production are retail and finance, which makes sense. Again, we talked about recommendation engines. In finance, it's fascinating because I think it's how they, unfortunately or fortunately, how they figure out, are they going to give you a loan? Can they find fraud? All of that type of stuff, right? Blockchain, NFTs, all of that craziness. So it's interesting to see, because that's such a complex world where, like, for instance, if a machine learning algorithm says like, no, you can't get a loan, you need to understand why, because it could be a bias thing, right? And so that idea of transparency and stuff like that. So I would say, so like 25% have stuff in production. However, what we're starting to think is that while people aren't sort of like rolling their own, there are many more people that are using AI that don't think they are. Like, I'm not even talking about like auto ML, just using a service. So like I talked about observability, right? You could use a service that helps you keep an eye on your infrastructure. That uses AI, but that you're not necessarily having AI in production, right? So I do think that there's always going to be a certain amount of people that are making their own, creating algorithms, but there's this next step, and I don't quite think we're there, of people utilizing things that have AI or using sort of auto ML services. And that's driven by, there is a lack of people that have the skills to do this high level work. And that's not just like in AI, like we have a lack of skills in the security. I mean, it's just, and I don't mean like the people that are there, I'm not even talking about them, but like technology is just growing by leaps and bounds, and there's just not enough people to skill up to like be able to do it, right? So that's a problem. And then we talked about data. The thing that I thought was funny was like, we have lots of data and you think your data is good until you go and use it, and then you're like, oh man.
And then you get a reality check, just like not as good as being told it was by X person or X team. Like
So I think it's a little stagnant, because I think I don't know what to call them. It's like sort of the first wave that are doing things or bought in are a part of organizations that understand that a large part of what they can offer is there's a component of AI. But then I think there's going to be sort of like the de facto sort of like AI, which you may not call it out by its name. It's going to be used. And I almost wonder, so when we, maybe this next year, when we talk about doing a survey on AI adoption, which you can check out, it's more about, I think we have to add that question, I guess, and question what we mean by adoption.
It's a big thing. That's a good one. What do we actually mean by adoption? That's a good like tagline.
Right.
Use something for that, because I think what the use of adoption is going to change massively. Like I saw, and I don't know if it's true, so I really don't, but I saw that the rumors were that Apple's going to make their product launch soon, and it's going to be their biggest product launch ever. And usually Steve Jobs would do like 2 or 3 product launches. Now I think they're doing close to 10, which is pretty insane. One of them is going to be their Apple VR headset, rumored apparently, and usually they're pretty accurate when these rumors come out. So just think how much that, because I've got a pair of, I don't have them with me, but I've got a pair of Google glasses that I was kind of gifted. And like they were walking me through how much that changes like training development, what you were saying, Rachel.
Yeah.
You think, like if you get a big brand that's very product driven, like Apple, everyone's got a bloody Apple phone, and you think if they get that VR headset, it like you said, it takes that leap and bound, brings it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's that old thing, right? Where it was like the iPod is basically like a storage device, right? But that's not how they presented it. It was about being able to have your music library with you and listen to it. Yeah. The other thing I didn't even touch upon, and I'll just mention briefly, is like industry and manufacturing. I mean, there's so much data there that I think those industries are just starting to look at. And I think there's a lot to be done there with streamlining supply chain. There's just so much to be done. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. And I think, like I said, it's about using, like with blockchain, which I know like cryptocurrencies like I don't want to say went away, but like crash. There's people who will specialize in something like this, and then the rest of us will use the services that come out of it. And I think that's the other thing too, like VC's still putting money into AI, right? So that shows you that, you know, they haven't moved on to something else, or the interest is waning. I think it's more about services that you're going to see. And like I said before, like I use AI, like I've adopted AI, like just asking Siri. So I think we have to think about it differently.
I think that's a great point, because I see, and I know we've got a few minutes left. There's another question I want to ask, but quickly. Jeff Winter, a great guy at Microsoft. He leads like the industry, or he's very involved. I don't know if he's very involved with Industry 4.0, and it's I've had some fascinating chats about what that's going to do. Like everyone doing, going to the cloud and using all that kind of going to the edge. And using.
Oh, right, yeah, we didn't talk about that either.
Awesome to see it. And also I always think when people tell me like, oh, but I don't understand AI, I don't use AI, I'm like, well, have you got an iPhone? They're like, yeah. I'm like, have you ever done a voice note, or have you ever done like ask Siri a question? And they're like, yeah. Well, you've used AI. And I was like, I'm telling you, this phone is using more AI
exactly.
It's like relaying almost.
Well, like you said, like the edge is a certain problem too. Like, how do you do like resource constrained AI, right? Where everything, like you said, is happening on, like, I have my watch, right? Like watch or your phone or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue. And there's a lot going on there too, like we're saying.
Yeah, we need to have an in-person chat, Rachel. I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this, and could have I'm really trying to create, I don't know where I'm going to do it, but eventually create in-person podcast, which I think would be a lot of fun. And
that would be fun.
Could have very nice coffees or very nice beers or whatever it is to just relax the conversation. But final question, what I want to ask, and maybe for the audience to learn for a final takeaway as well, because very grateful for your time. What do you think the biggest bottlenecks to AI adoption are, quickly in a wrap up, or details you can go into?
Unclean data. I think that's definitely an issue. Not being clear about why you want to use it.
Yeah.
And then I think this idea, which we didn't touch into, maybe we'll have to have another call, but AI governance, which is just basically like, what are your rules? How do you secure it? What are you going to do if it goes wrong? There's a lot, frankly. There's a lot of bottlenecks, I think, which again, back to services, but main ones, lack of skilled workers, and I think poor data hygiene, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good wrap up. But yeah, this has been fun. I feel like we definitely need to do it again, because this is, I've got 10 more, 15, 30, 50 more questions I want to ask you. But I think if anyone that's watching that wants to reach out to you, I think you can definitely provide some great answers. I've seen some questions coming in through the chat. But on that note, just really want to say massive thank you for joining us, Rachel. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next time we get to do this.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. And everyone joining today, it's been great to be joined by Rachel. And as always, let us know who you want us to bring onto the show, who you want us to interview, so we can bring you the great minds such as Rachel to tell you about the things. Like today, I've learned about a new co-pilot, and so I get to learn with you, which is always exciting. But thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world, and we'll catch you on the next one tomorrow. See you soon.